Look around you. Plastic is just everywhere. And we all know it's a huge problem, but let's be honest, our actions don't always line up with that knowledge. So what's going on there? What's the disconnect? Well, today we're diving into a fascinating study that doesn't just ask that question, it actually answers it. And it does so by using a high school in Texas as a kind of real-world lab. What they discovered is pretty much a blueprint for how to create real change.
Okay, so before we can really get into what makes this study such a breakthrough, we need to get our heads around the sheer size of the mountain we're trying to climb here. Let's just take a second to look at the scale of this plastic problem.
Just let that number sink in for a minute. 413.8 million tons. That's how much new plastic was produced in 2023 alone. To try and put that into perspective, that's like the weight of more than 4 million blue whales in just 1 year. And the craziest part, most of it's designed to be used once, and then it just sticks around for centuries. And this is where this huge global problem gets, well, really personal. This isn't just about sad pictures of oceans or overflowing landfills anymore. These tiny little particles, microplastics, they're literally everywhere. They've gotten into our water, our food, and yep, recent studies have confirmed they've even been found inside our own bodies, in our blood.
And that right there is the big puzzle, isn't it? We see the awful pictures, we know the risks are totally real. So why do we still grab that plastic bottle without thinking? What is stopping us from bridging that huge gap between knowing what we should do and, actually doing it? Well, it turns out the answer isn't really about recycling bins or logistics. It's all in our heads. It's about psychology.
So to crack this psychological code, the researchers turned to a really powerful tool that's designed to figure out exactly why we make the choices we do. It's called the theory of planned behavior, or TPB for short. And honestly, the best way to think about it is like a decoder ring for human action. The theory basically says that the choices we make, especially the ones we actually think about, they're not random, not at all. They actually follow a pretty predictable pattern that's pulled by just a few key levers in our brain. Okay, so the theory boils our decision-making down to 3 main things. First up is your attitude. This is just how you personally feel about it. Like, do you think carrying a reusable bottle is a good thing to do? Is it cool? Is it responsible? Second, we've got subjective norms. This is all about social pressure. What do you think other people expect from you? Do all your friends use reusable bottles, or are you going to be the odd one out? And third, there's perceived control. This is simply about how easy or hard you think it is. Is there a water fountain right there to refill your bottle, or is buying one from the vending machine your only real choice? Now, this next part is absolutely crucial. These 3 things, your attitude, the social pressure, how much control you feel you have, they don't just magically make you do something. Nope. What they do is they shape your intention to do it. Think of your intention as the on switch. It's that moment you decide, okay, yeah, I'm going to do this. That switch, that mental commitment, is the real target if you want to change behavior. Okay, so armed with this theory, the researchers decided to take it out of the textbook and put it to the test in a real-world setting, a totally normal American high school. So here's what they did. They went to Cy-Fair High School in Texas and got 219 students to take part. They gave them this really smart questionnaire that was designed to measure all 3 of those key things from the theory: their attitudes about plastic, the social pressure they felt, and how much control they believed they had. And then they also asked them about their intention to reduce plastic use and what they were actually doing. So you might be wondering, why high school students? Well, as the study itself points out, this is such a critical age. This is when we're forming the habits and the views of the world that can stick with us for life. Plus, high schoolers have a huge amount of influence on their families and friends, but for some reason, they're often totally overlooked in sustainability research. And get this is my favorite part. The lead researchers who wrote this published, peer-reviewed scientific paper were 2 11th graders from that exact high school, Alejandro and Gregory Fernandez. I mean, how cool is that? They weren't just being studied, they were the actual scientists running the show. So, what did these high school scientists find out? Well, the results started to show some really interesting patterns about who's most likely to act green, and more importantly, why. One of the first things that jumped out of the data was a pretty clear pattern based on gender. On average, the female students reported having more positive attitudes, stronger intentions to act, and said they performed more eco-friendly behaviors than the male students. It was a really significant difference, which kind of makes you wonder, what's behind that gap? And this next finding shows this huge imbalance. Imagine a seesaw. On one side, you have the students' personal attitudes, which were really positive. I mean, deep down, they felt pretty strongly that reducing plastic was the right thing to do. But on the other side of the seesaw, you have social pressure, which was way, way lighter. They just weren't feeling like their friends or their family or the school really expected them to follow through on those beliefs. It's a massive disconnect. So the big question is, did this whole theory of planned behavior thing actually work? The answer is, yeah, it worked incredibly well. Those three factors we talked about, attitudes, social norms, and perceived control, together they could explain almost 64% of why one student had a stronger intention to act than another. That's a huge deal. It means this model is a seriously powerful predictor of what people are planning to do. Okay, now this diagram might look a little complicated at first, but it tells a really simple and powerful story. Look at the three boxes on the left: attitudes, norms, and control. See how those arrows point strongly to that middle circle, intention? That just shows us that they're really good at shaping what we plan to do. But now check this out. Look for the arrows that go directly from those three boxes over to behavior on the right. See how weak those connections are? They're tiny. The real superhighway to changing behavior runs right through the middle. It goes from intention to behavior. If you want to change what the people do, you have to first change what they commit to doing.
So here's the bottom line, the big takeaway. Just telling people plastic is bad, it's not enough. Even making it a little easier to recycle, that's not quite enough either. The strategies that really work are the ones that laser focus on building that strong, internal, personal commitment, that intention to actually make a change.
And this is where this study goes from being interesting to being genuinely useful. Because these student scientists didn't just point out the problem, they actually created a practical, step-by-step blueprint for how any school could take these insights and use them to make a real difference. And their blueprint is really smart. It attacks the problem from all sides. To tackle the social pressure piece, they suggest things like peer-led programs and student eco-clubs to build up those positive social norms. To tackle that perceived control issue, they recommend simple, practical things like putting in more water bottle refill stations. And to boost positive attitudes and that all-important commitment, they suggest things like public pledges and specific campaigns. It's a full-on strategy. So if you boil it all down, the game plan is actually pretty clear. You just have to target each piece of the puzzle. You make the behavior social to crank up the social norms. You make it easy so people feel like they have control, and you make it normal and empowering to strengthen those positive attitudes. You do all that, and you forge that powerful intention that leads to real action. So what we have here is a data-driven, psychological blueprint that worked for one high school. It really does seem to crack the code on how to turn good intentions into real-world action. And that leaves us with a pretty big final question, right? What would happen if we took this blueprint and applied it everywhere? In every school, every community, every company? What could we really achieve if we started using these ideas to finally close that gap between knowing what's right and actually doing it?